It's a challenge in terms of learning as well, but I think it's wonderful industry to be in. It keeps you on your toes all the time. It makes you a learner for life. And you also become a people-centric person, because ultimately technology is technology, but
the human side.
Who builds the technology, right? It's not AI today building the technology.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Unboxed, the podcast where we unravel the heart and soul of branding, marketing, technology, and more. Today I have with me Anilesh Kumar. He is the Managing Director for the Middle East, India, and Asia Pacific and he's also the Global EVP of Business Applications for InTWO, a cloud-first technology business. He has over 2 decades of experience in the Microsoft ecosystem. Anilesh is known for his customer-first approach and servant leadership. He's founded Levtech Consulting in 2009, turning it into a top Microsoft partner. He loves mentoring startups and believes in the power of technology to transform business. Thank you, Anilesh, for being part of the show.
Thank you, John. It's wonderful to be here and seeing you after a really long time, right? So it's a nice surprise to hear from you and to be on this podcast.
Tracing back our journey, like you said, it's been such a long journey. I've known you for so long, although not regularly on and off, but I've been following your career journey, your career path, and I'm incredibly proud, of where you are today. And when we first met, both you and me were in different places, but it's really nice to know that you've grown so much, and you're leading a group of people, amazing people. I just want to understand from your side, firstly, how has this journey been in the technology space? You're a veteran in the space, and I just want to understand, how's this journey been over the past 2 decades?
Yeah, so a little bit of introduction as well, right? So I think in terms of education, I'm a computer engineer. I did a degree in business finance. So let's say I academically learned a little bit about IT and technology in my education. If I go one step back, I would say my father used to work for Digital, which got acquired by Compaq at a certain point. I lived in Bangalore when it was called the Pensioners Paradise.
So you've always been infused in the technology realm.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So, I think it's maybe a little bit of destiny, right? So I think it has always been a part of my life growing up.
Okay.
And as I got into even my first venture, which was a marketing firm, which is where I met you.
Yes.
We ended up serving.
I think we met before that, I believe, right? Where you were previously working, but then, Frequency, we worked together on Frequency as well, yes.
That's right. And we were serving tech firms from a marketing communication standpoint. So though I went into, let's say, a little bit of a different field in marketing, the customer base was still very tech oriented, and it was awesome, right? Because we were serving Apple those days, and we would get the test units from Apple. So we saw the iPod before the market saw the iPod.
Oh, right, okay.
It was very cool in those young days to be associated with the tech industry, and then eventually founded Levtech, which is a Microsoft Dynamics partner organization. Again, transforming businesses even before the word digital transformation came about, right?
Yes.
We were doing, let's say, old school ERP for the most part, and it was interesting because ERP itself as a concept has been around for, I don't know, maybe 30-40 years easily.
Yes.
And it maybe came from MRP and then became ERP over a period of time.
Yes.
And did that for a while, and we scaled that business, and obviously the world has progressed, let's say, so quickly on technology. Technology has become so central to life that I think it's amazing that the pace of change is really something that is amazing. It's sometimes too difficult to keep pace with. It's a challenge in terms of learning as well, but I think it's wonderful industry to be in. It keeps you on your toes all the time. It makes you a learner for life. And you also become a people-centric person, because ultimately technology is technology, but
the human side.
Who builds the technology, right? It's not AI today building the technology. It's people who's
Exactly.
who are putting their blood and sweat and heart into building technology. And I think it's also a nice connection between people and technology that I see in business. And my experience has been fantastic in summary, right? I think 2 years of seeing different facets of technology, the human side of technology, and the future of technology. I think that has been great. And that puts us as a vantage point to see where the world is going. I think that's wonderful.
Yes. And I think in some aspects we are aligned, because although my core background is into developing brands, I focus a lot of what I do on AI technology and what's happening around, developing around us. So in that aspect, I think, there's a lot of alignment in the industry you're in. And although I am in brands, I love technology. It's something I really follow on a daily basis. And I like to keep up to date with everything that is around. We just came back from GTEx Africa, where we were participating as an exhibitor. And it was a wonderful experience, just being there, meeting the people, talking to them, understanding what's happening around us, and so on. So when I look at your journey, I see 3 core components: being an entrepreneur, cloud computing, being in the cloud computing space, and being a Microsoft technology partner for so long. So I have questions for you in all these 3 areas, and I'm sure you'll give me some good insights. Delving into the cloud computing side. Cloud computing has evolved dramatically over the past so many years, and especially it's become even so important with the artificial as a service, AI as a service they've introduced, and so many things. In your view, being in this space, how has cloud computing evolved over the years? What's changed? How was it before when you started your journey, and where is it now, and where is it heading towards in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge legacy, right, in the tech world. Some of it even predates my journey in tech. So if you think about mainframes and punch cards, I hear this almost anecdotally from people who are older than me in the tech industry, and they talk about this world where there was these large server farms with mainframes in them, and you would probably hear that they're still around a little bit, right? That was, let's say, where the world was. Aviation, banking, a lot of these industries and the core applications that ran in these businesses was powered by let's say, the older technology. And what we've seen is that over time, servers and let's say infrastructure updated, and then we saw private cloud come about. So we saw, first of all, companies build out data centers for themselves. Either it's a small business and you have a few servers and you have internal infrastructure, or you're a larger company and you start creating data centers for your business. And then eventually you had infrastructure as a service, right? So then you had the telcos going in, creating the data centers. We had private data center players, co-locating their servers with the telcos. And you had, basically infrastructure as a service. So you could buy your compute and your storage as a business from the Etisalats and the Do's of the world, right? So that was kind of where the world went. And then eventually we saw that then transform, rapidly into what we call as hyperscale cloud, which is what we hear today as Azure or AWS or Alibaba Cloud or Google Cloud, right? For the most part, there are more players, but I think these are the 4 dominant players. And once you had the hyperscale cloud come in, you saw that the ability to compute, the ability to scale, the ability to transform your business just changed dramatically, right? Because then the constraints of compute really were taken out. It's about the bandwidth as a business to spend in that direction, and then what did you really need, right? Because but the limitations went away, and that really was the so that's, let's say, the journey of what has happened, right? In a broad sense. And what has that done to the world for the future is that it's created this pathway into AI, because cloud went from being, let's say, a good to have in businesses to now today being a necessity. And why is it a necessity? Is not because it's better to be on the cloud than on premise, because there's always an argument that are you paying too much for the cloud, or is it is it secure, and so forth. But I think the necessity that has come about is because the world is moving into this world of AI, which is clearly the future, right? So there is the buzzword of generative AI, and then there is AI by itself, and sometimes it made common in some ways, but there are differences.
Yes, I think now we know generative AI because it's become a popular terminology. I think AI has been there, technology, the fundamentals have been applied previously as well. Machine learning and things like that. Yes.
Absolutely. So AI and ML have been around for a while. That's kind of the right point, right? And it has not scaled significantly in the past because of two reasons, right? One is the ability to compute was tougher, and the ability to code AI was tougher in the past. So what has happened is now with the cloud, your compute limitations have gone, and with things like low code, which in a layman's term is that you can code AI without being a coder, right? So Jinesh and Anilesh, who potentially are not developers, can go in and start writing out AI scenarios that help us in daily life or in business.
Exactly.
So I think that's kind of where the world is going. And I think that's inevitable. It is definitely already visible very much today. Let's say you go into a retail environment, you are able to as a business you're able to see, hey, what does Junaid like in this particular let's for example take its restaurant, what kind of food does Junaid like, how does he like to be seated, what time of the day does he eat, what kind of food, whatever, right? So this is already so pervasive in the world, and that's what we're going to see more and more of, where basically the power of choice is brought forward to the individual or to the business. And then it is for us to make intelligent decisions and intelligent choices, which probably will touch upon a different topic of what we will discuss. It then goes back to the human element of values and how we make decisions. Right? So that's kind of what we see the values
and stuff like that.
So that's kind of where I think the world is going, and it means a lot for the future of the world.
Like I said, I follow keynotes, and I think there's been 2 keynotes back to back. The first one was Microsoft keynote, where they introduced the Microsoft Copilot Plus PCs for the consumers, and a host of other solutions and services cloud-based. And Apple recently launched their Apple Intelligence, AI rebranded as Apple Intelligence. And Apple was a company that was always, on-device computing. They talked about privacy a lot, but something that's changed with the recent announcement of Apple Intelligence is that they've introduced something called private cloud servers. So with like what you said, the need for computing power for AI and sending data to the cloud and getting the responses and stuff like that. So it's rapidly evolving brands are having to use that as the key to move forward with technology. How do you you talked about the evolution of cloud computing the next 5 years. What kind of applications do you see apart from AI for businesses? Because I know your area of specialization is on a more enterprise level. So what other kind of developments do you see in the cloud computing space?
Yeah, I think from a cloud computing standpoint, you would see multiple things, right? I think first of all, I think AI is going to be like a, let's say, strand of DNA in everything that happens in terms of tech, right? So whether it's consumer technology, you mentioned Apple, so Apple is now bringing in AI into very much the consumer world, right?
Yes.
We're going to see AI in businesses because, Copilot with Microsoft, for example, generative AI being infused into applications that Microsoft offers.
Yes.
You're going to see the same from SAP, you're going to see the same from Oracle, you're going to see this from almost every player there, right? So AI is more or less common denominator that is going to be there as a resultant of the cloud, as we spoke. Now, what else would we see apart from AI? If I understand your question correctly, that's
Exactly.
AI is one angle, but what else is going to happen in tech beyond AI, right? I think low code is a big part to play in everything, because I think what the world is seeing is that today, with the speed of change and the speed of let's say how technology has to grow, there is going to be a shortage of development capacity in the world. How much ever we increase capacity in terms of people, and let's say that the tech industry growing in terms of people, the ability to meet the demand of creating apps and creating scenarios and creating let's say scripting for different purposes, is we're going to fall short as a race, let's say, right? And in that scenario, low code really takes away that burden of having to do it by developers, and you bring it to the common man or the common professional. And then everybody is a tech professional in that world, and every business is a digital business. This is what you would see eventually. So I think that has got a really strong part to play. The other side that you see is that there is a lot of progress on chip technology. If you're following the stock markets, you see NVIDIA and all the chip manufacturers.
It's become number 3 now, most valued companies.
For sure. And NVIDIA, let's say 3 years ago, or even did we really think about NVIDIA stock?
I first heard, when they were doing this gaming chips and the boards and stuff like that, but then I think they've hit the valuation. They're number 3 in company valuation after Microsoft, Apple, and
correct.
So they beat Tesla.
Correct. So and where is it coming from, right? That's really coming out of the wonderful chip technology and the progress they're making on the chip side, which then is consumed by the AI compute, right? That's kind of the storyline.
Exactly.
So chip technology is dramatically scaling up. I would say apart from these two, there is elements like quantum computing, for example. So again, to do with speed of computing that we will see really scaling up, because everything is going to push towards faster processing, more real time, ability to crunch petabytes of data in relatively short amounts of time. So this is kind of where we will see everything go. And I think there are so many different angles, right? You can think about inequity in terms of the internet, for example, and you would say that, hey, we're living in this tech world, but there's a lot of the world where internet is still kind of
patchy,
not at the right levels, right? And then that has impact on society, impact on learning, impact on progress in those parts of the world. So again, you got new ways of diffusing bandwidth and diffusing internet itself across society, right? So there's so many touch points that are happening in tech. And again, I think this thinking of every business as a tech business is important, because I think then you start seeing all these new business models coming about, and it's difficult to summarize in a little bit, right? But every industry will have a different play and a different business model coming out of digitalization. So we saw retail becoming e-commerce. You're seeing manufacturing becoming lights out manufacturing, for example. You're seeing automobiles becoming autonomous vehicles, right? So you're seeing everything change. So
everything is moving towards the cloud, right?
So I think this is going to be, I think AI is pervasive in tech, and tech is pervasive in life. So that's kind of the way I would think about it.
That's quite insightful. That's really interesting point to think about. Anilesh, now I just want to taking a look at Microsoft. You've been a Microsoft partner, your businesses for so long. Not that this show is sponsored by Microsoft or anything, but because you have such close connection, being a Microsoft partner for so long, and Microsoft being one of the most valuable companies with valued over $3 trillion, and how has your relationship been with Microsoft? What is it like working as a partner with Microsoft? And you told me something quite interesting off camera, where Microsoft has its own business P&L, and then they have their business with their partners. So if you could just highlight on how your experience has been working as a Microsoft partner, and how the dynamics work.
For sure. So I think if I reflect about my interaction, my learning, and my experience with Microsoft, so I would say a few things, right? So one is Microsoft is a massive organization, over 100,000 employees, and scaling in different ways at a very rapid pace, right? Now, having said that, I think one of their USPs has been, one would think that the USP is tech, right? They're a product company, and they're pioneering in tech in a number of ways. But I think the other side of what they've done really, really well is to be a partner-centric organization, right? So they've been extremely intentional.
This is something new that I didn't know, because we know Microsoft as a technology company, but how they build a business around partnerships, this is quite insightful.
That's kind for me. I think that's a little bit their secret sauce, and which and it's not unique, because a lot of companies have a partner model, and
how they drive this, how they keep this connection going, and
correct. But Microsoft has done this supremely well, I would say. So they started out with a partner-oriented mindset. They enhanced that. They took that partner-oriented mindset and they connected that to the cloud business that they were growing, and they've been able to shift from being, let's say, a transactional license-oriented business to being a cloud subscription-oriented business. Everything powered by the tech that they're offering. But I think they've done this wonderfully with the partner model that they have. So my experience has been, definitely positive. And again, like you say, the show is not sponsored by Microsoft.
I wish we could get some money from them, but I hope they will send us a check after this show.
That's wishful, but I would say that my experience has been very positive. Obviously, big companies have the flaws of being big. That's true universally, I would say. Big corporates are big corporates, but at the same time, they have been able to think about their values reasonably strongly, and they've done well in terms of thinking about, hey, how do we build a customer-centric, partner-oriented organization powered by tech, and they've kept that very, very strong in their DNA. And I think that's kind of why they've succeeded, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of companies come and go, and
absolutely, they've been
up and down over a long period of time.
They've been a household name for so long,
correct,
as well as on the business side and enterprise side as well. So
correct,
and they still maintain that number one spot. So that tells a lot about their business model, right?
And I think it's also the focus, I would say, right? The other side is, they've been so focused on tech, and the past was that they commoditized and some would say monopolized the desktop with Windows. And then there was a point in time where we said, hey, Microsoft is now going to lose this Windows game a little bit. And what's going to happen? But then they came back very strongly with Azure and M365, and they've been able to keep this innovation flow going on very strongly. And I remember this very starkly, because I was in Redmond, and we were in a room with Satya Nadella and about, let's say, 80 to 100 people. I've been fortunate to at least be in an audience with him two times, in a, let's say, reasonably intimate audience.
That's nice.
And there was somebody in the audience who said, hey, we hear, I can't remember which tech company was doing. I think one of the tech companies was buying out a big studio. I think Fox, or one of the large studios in the US. And they said, hey, would Microsoft think about getting into the media space and buy out a large studio? And Satya said, see, we have the money to do it. I don't think that's the problem. It's not going to dent a balance sheet. We're going to be fine. But it's about focus. And we want to do things that matter to the line of business that we have, and the direction we want to take the world in. And everything else could be a distraction. So we want to be really focused on where we're going. So I think that's also kind of very important.
From a brand perspective, this is what we tell our clients and customers. It's better to specialize, be focused, rather than getting into everything, because when you get into everything, you're competing mostly on the price. But if you're focused, you have a specialized offering, and then you have very specific goals, and you're able to achieve results in a more focused way.
Correct.
Yeah.
And maybe one other thing I would say about Microsoft, from to an outsider, sometimes it may look like a little bit of marketing and fluff, but I think they've been able to intentionally and I think meaningfully connect social purpose and corporate P&L, right? So that's sometimes not easy, and a company of that size has to think a little bit beyond the P&L and the share price and say, hey, what are we doing in the world?
Absolutely.
Where are we adding value to the future? How are we influencing lives and societies? And how does that also, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a charitable organization, but how does that positively impact the P&L? And I think they do that beautifully, in my opinion.
That's nice. That's nice to hear. I mean, from an insider. So looking, I want to pick your brains on your entrepreneurial side. On your LinkedIn profile, you talk about two things. You talk about customer-centric mindset and servant leadership model. Can you elaborate on these two? What do you mean by these two concepts, and how are you applying this?
Yeah, I think these are fundamental, let's say, value systems or thoughts that help us and guide us through every day in business, and help us in making choices a little bit. To the earlier point I was talking about in terms of choices. So these kind of values really help us in making those choices when you have different priorities and different conflicting objectives or directions in business. So that's kind of where we draw our inspiration from. And I would say customer centricity is very important in business, because everyone hears about the phrase that cash is king. I always think that if cash is king, then the customer is the emperor, because the cash is flowing from the customer, right? So I think that's very, very important. Especially, I would say, I've run a B2B business, right? So my lens is a little bit B2B oriented, and I would say, your customer lifetime value, for example, is very, very important. It's a key metric for success. If you're able to restrict churn in this world of, every business is today trying to build recurring revenues. That's the driver of valuation in business across the board. And how do you build recurring revenues is by restricting customer churn. This is the practical element of it.
Yes.
And how do you arrest customer churn is by being really, having the customer intimacy, and having the customer intimacy is down to culture. And because, truth be told, not all customers are nice. Customers can be painful and difficult and challenging. And in that world, I don't fault them, because they are protecting their own business, and you have a job to do in serving them. And in that process, if you build a culture, I would say top down, where you say that, hey, we're going to be obsessed about our customer. And then that flows down to the next layer in your organization, and then that flows down to the shop floor or the developers or the drivers of whoever is at the execution level of the business. Then you really have this energy of being customer centric inside a business, and I think that's really valuable. And it's very important to build it from day one, because it's a direction you take, and then it snowballs over time.
Yes.
And I think that's very important. So that's one side of the story from what you asked me, and the other one is servant leadership, right? And I think servant leadership is very important again, and it's a mindset again, in my opinion, because it links very closely to the purpose of, at least for me, it links to the purpose of why we do business, right? So one of the things that we have is an opportunity to serve people, serve society in business, right? So why am I an entrepreneur, for example, I would say, is not necessarily to find success in P&L or to find commercial success, but to find purpose in life, right? And the purpose in life that I find is by growing other people, seeing the success of other team members, and finding success in their success, right? So that's let's say a very intrinsic part of why you are an entrepreneur. And then you build a culture of being connected to your people and really working closely with them and growing them up the ladder. And beauty is that then this actually contributes backwards towards your commercial success. The other way around is much harder, right? Where you try to say that, hey, I will gain the commercial success and I will share the commercial success. I think that is a little bit of a rough road in my opinion.
Never happens as well.
Yeah.
So, it's quite insightful, quite interesting to note, this, because when you talk to successful entrepreneurs, they normally talk about their success stories and what they've achieved, but taking your team along with you, empowering them, giving them opportunities, giving them a platform, and making sure that they succeed with you. Your success is their success is not everybody's cup of tea. You really need to have that right mindset to do it, and you need to embed that as part of your purpose in life. And I think it just makes sense what you say. Anilesh, like being an entrepreneur, having 2 decades of experience, people generally talk about, you've set up many companies, you've grown a lot, you manage 3 offices, Asia, and I just want to talk not just about what you've achieved, but on your journey, what kind of failures have you faced? And how did you overcome those failures? Just would be interesting to know, rather than talking about the success side of things, what are the failures? Because failures help you learn. A lot of entrepreneurs talk about their failures. It's because it helps, young people who want to get into the space to learn, understand, maybe not make the same mistakes.
Yeah, for sure. I think failures are wonderful, right? I think that's number one, that I think you have to embrace failure. I think that's part of the journey.
Yes.
And I think they're the best teachers, right? I mean, if you can learn from your mistakes, I think that's the greatest flywheel in many ways. In terms of learning, I would say in the entrepreneurial journey, one of the things that I think about is what would I do a little bit differently, right? I think that in that part, I would say it's always a learning curve. So the journey is a learning curve, and you're learning different things at different parts.
Everybody's journey is different,
For sure. And I think that's where, you have a learning curve in how do you manage the finance of the business. You have a learning curve in how do you do the go-to-market, how do you manage people. Leadership itself is a muscle that you need to practice and exercise, and you learn, not always with the right steps, sometimes with the wrong steps as well.
Yes.
So that is that learning curve, and what I think is that you can shortcut that learning curve a lot if you are able to anticipate that learning curve a little bit, right? So one thing is to run into a wall and then say, hey, I should not have run into the wall.
Yeah.
The other way is to take 5 steps back and say, hey, there's a wall there. Maybe I should not run into that, right? So I think that's possible today for every young entrepreneur, because there's so much content out there. There is so much advice out there. It's about you going and seeking that advice, right? And if you get that advice, then you shortcut that learning curve. That doesn't mean that you avoid the mistakes, but you can either mitigate it to some extent, or you can, you at least can find some optionality to those situations, in my opinion. So that's one thing. The other side, I would say, is a little bit focus again. I think focus is very important. Because when you get into, even when I got into business, I think you say, hey, can I do 6 products, and can I go into 3 markets, and can I, set up 2 offshore entities, and you go into a lot of things which can be distracting. So finding that focus is very critical in my opinion.
I think as a young entrepreneur, even for me personally, what we normally think as someone getting into business is, how can I reach out to the maximum number of people with the most diverse offering? And what happens is, again, you undercut your pricing, and you suffer in the end, and then you have to close shop, right? So I think, like you mentioned, focus is a very critical aspect of being a business person, right?
Correct. And if I may say, the third one is, I would say, being authentic, right? I think there's a lot of advice out there, and there is a lot of people to look up to. There's also maybe in your own social and business circles, you'll find peers and mentors that you can learn from. But at the end of the day, you have to be you, and your business has to be your business, right? So there is no right or wrong. There is no best practice, in my opinion. There is, for yourself, you have to chart out your journey, taking all these inputs and creating your own story. So in that, being very authentic individually and very authentic as a business is also very critical, in my opinion.
Sure. Anilesh, before I let you go, I have one important question. So you are a father. You have two kids, and you're an entrepreneur. You're quite busy. You're flying, jetting around the whole world, and the advice or the mentorship we give to, as a business person, I'm talking more from a business perspective. We give to our colleagues and our team members are quite different than the advice we would give to our children. But there is an element of our experience and exposure that we try to, tell our children, advise our children. Like being a father and an entrepreneur, how do you want to shape, how do you see, I know you don't want to control the future of your kids, but what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's a good analogy, right? Parenting and
business,
entrepreneurship, both are challenging.
I've had guests to come here and said, I'm a mother first, and that's my priority, and then I'm an entrepreneur.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think let me start with the commonality, right? The commonality is you start at the base level of values, right?
Yes.
So you sort of have to think about, hey, you got your children and you got your business, and what do you really want at a base level, right? You want your children to grow up with a good value system. They could be a scientist, or
that's the most important thing, right?
Any other handyman or whatever kind of work, right? Doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, they should know what they're doing. They should know the reasons for what they're doing, the why of what they're doing.
True.
And they should be honest, integral, good people, right? That's kind of the number one thing that you think about.
Yeah.
And the same applies to your business, because you would say, hey, I would
just
want
the
this.
messaging is different, the way you speak.
In the corporate world, you would say values could be very fluffy things that you stick on a wall, but at the end of the day, it is, can you tell your team and convince them that, hey, this is what we stand for.
Exactly.
Let us run the business in this manner.
True.
And there'll be 200 things that will tell us that we shouldn't do it in this manner.
True.
But let's not change our path because of these 200 things, right? Let's stick to the process.
True.
And the process succeeds. It's not necessarily the action that succeeds, right?
Yes.
So we in every day we are executing, we are sending the next proposal, we are finding the next investor.
True.
That's execution, but where does the values hold ground? I think that's kind of the base foundation across both
I think it makes sense,
elements, right? I think that's kind of one thing. I would say the other element is really having I think it applies to individuals, in this case children, and a business. It is start with a good vision, which is it's two things for me, right? What's your long term, and then what is your why? Why are you doing this, right? What does it mean to you beyond the P&L, for example, right? Or why does it mean to you? Like if I take my child as an example, or my children as an example. Why do you want to be X? Is it because you feel happy, or do you want to do it because it makes more money for you, or because I like cars? I want to be a race car driver because I like cars. So it could be different things, right? But that addressing that why is maybe very, very critical early in business. To be honest, when I started my entrepreneurial journey, I didn't think this hard, right? We sort of get into it. I started business at the age of 25. So you get into it and then you say, okay, I need to think about this a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of the advantage of having all this content and advice in the world, that you can really say, now, if I was 25 years old, I should be really saying, what is my why? Why am I doing this? Is this really what I really want to do long term? And then I would connect that to the how and the what, right? I mean, what is how are you going to do it? what are you really going to offer? What is your USP? That becomes the execution layer almost, and the strategic planning layer of the business.
True.
And then you have to really get down. For every young entrepreneur, I would advise that they start looking at business plans seriously, build out as much as possible. Think about a go-to-market plan. Think about the delivery model. Think about the people structure. All the facets of traditional organization. Even when you're very small as a business, you could be 2-3 people, but think about, hey, how is this going to look 3 years down the line, right? And have that vision and planning, because that's intentional, and I think that then flows very well. And also, it's not necessarily in the beginning, but also think what is your exit path, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into it and don't really have a defined exit.
True.
And you could run a lifestyle business and think that this is going to be my business for foreseeable future, and it is a lifestyle business. But even in that model, what does an exit path look like, right? I think that's very important to understand.
This is something new for me. I've not thought about it so deeply.
Yeah. But it's why I say it's important is that you may start off thinking that it's a lifestyle business, but you may still want to exit at a certain point in time. Having the knowledge of what helps me exit and what is required to exit in a good way, and modeling your business or reverse engineering it in that direction,
that's nice.
Always keeps you comfortable that should you want to exit, you know that there is a exit door that you can get out of, right? So
true. Absolutely.
That's a useful one to have in the back of your mind.
It's quite interesting, yeah. Finally, being with this, living with this, especially the industry you're in, it's chaos. There's so much happening every day. New things are coming up. Plus being a family man, plus running a business. How do you keep up with everything? What is your mantra for life? How do you balance everything out as an entrepreneur?
You're talking about work-life imbalance?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So I think it's super hard, right? There's overdose of communication with everything, and this being an entrepreneur is a very consuming way of life, I would say. And then you have your personal life with kids, and you want to perfect everything, and then you can't perfect everything, right? That's kind of the reality of life. So I think that there are only two things that come to mind, right? One is that it's always a striving, right? So it's not perfection. So it's you strive for that balance, and you'll never find that balance, to be honest. But you're always pushing in a direction, and in that striving, what I tend to do is that the two things that I again try to do is I try to integrate everything. So, for example, like I mentioned, I was traveling last week. Weekend I was in close to Amsterdam, let's say. So I went boxing in a boxing club with a colleague of mine. So I integrate, let's say, being with my colleague, being in a foreign country, and getting some exercise at the same time, right? So you do that. Or you could be in a hotel room and you can do, you could say calisthenics, and it's a fancy word, but it's basically doing push-ups and some simple exercises in your hotel room, right? Or you find, and again, I think there's a lot of tech again available, right? So even if you don't know good exercises, you open up YouTube, do a few by following somebody.
So blend
everything. That's number one. The second element I would say in your daily life is to schedule, right? So your personal life is as important as your professional life, and how you can do well is by getting your calendar really, really strong. So my calendar, for example, is built out professionally and privately. So like, for example, if I have to go pick up my kids, it's on my calendar. If I have to go play tennis, it's on my calendar. So you calendarize your whole life in a good way, and then in that sense you don't cancel your private appointments as well. So I think that's really useful and keeps that balance. And the third thing, which I think I picked this up a little bit from advice, right, is that I think as a busy professional and as an entrepreneur, you will always you'll always be at points in time where you'll have conflicting professional and private appointments, or reasons, or time constraints, right? At that time, I think you have to prioritize, and in that I would potentially say, the private ones, important ones, take precedence over the professional ones.
Sure.
So you have to be there for your family when they need you. You need to be there for your kids.
Yes.
At the right moments in time. And then I think that prioritization is critical in my opinion.
Yeah. I blended. Picking up on what you said, blending, a personal and professional life and getting the right mix out of it. Just to give you some, story. I mean, this is not the perfect way to do it, but whenever I'm with my kids, whenever I talk to them, even if it is my grade oneer or the one who's in grade 3, I just usually casually chat about, what's happening in office. Like, this is the project that I had and this is how we did it. The client said this. It's not that they understand everything. I do talk about their school and their life, but the thing is, what happens is now my young daughter who's in grade 3, she knows my pitch presentation probably. She can do a branding pitch to anyone. She knows the terminology. She knows. So I think because like we had this discussion, what they learn in school today is quite outdated, and it's. I'm not saying it's not important, but the way it's delivered, the kind of the key skills that they're learning is not in line with today's world. So there's a need to actually give them this additional kind of life lessons, and that's basically what I'm trying to do. So essentially, and they keep asking me about what happened to that project and what happened to this project.
That's wonderful, right? Because I think they learn so quickly nowadays because I think the learning abilities are better because of technology again, I would say. And then you put them in outside their curriculum into new things. And their development is so much more faster and nicer, and at the same time you feel a little bit more balanced, I would say, because you're then spending time with your children and you're contributing to their growth as well. Otherwise, we're both guys, so sometimes we feel that we're lopsided by how our wives spend time with the children and how much they're able to do versus us, right? So we try to do as much as we can. So that's also wonderful, I would say.
Thank you, Anilesh. It was a wonderful conversation. I think I'm taking away a lot of insights from our discussion. I'm sure our listeners, have taken this away too. And thank you for coming in, spending time with us. And I hope we can have you again to talk on other topics in future.
It was great, Dinesh. Thank you so much. I loved the conversation, and it was different topics and very
coffee
nice discussing.
Coffee with AJ.
No, you can rewrite your podcast as well, but I really enjoyed it, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. So that's it, and please do subscribe, and we're available on all major platforms like YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.